How you doing? Oh, hold on a second. Okay, watch out. Let's see if that'll be better. Let me see something.
Brian Laundrie may be dead, but his story is still a mystery. Tonight, his lawyer joins me live for tough questions about this blockbuster case. Steve Bertolino, one-on-one. What did the Laundries know and when did they know it? And why were there so many inconsistencies between the family and the police? And later, real death, real pain, and very real questions in the land of make-believe. Tonight, a walkout by crew members over safety on the set of Alec Baldwin's film. Just hours before the star and the producer fired a deadly shot from a prop gun while rehearsing for the movie. Welcome to Banfield. When the manhunt for Brian Laundrie ended, a whole new chapter in this saga began. The questions that have been so confounding. Why did Brian leave his fiancée in Wyoming? What was his state of mind before he left home for the reserve? And what, if any, role did he play in the death of Gabby Petito? Fortunately, I'm joined by the man who has a lot of those answers, possibly the attorney for the Laundrie family, Stephen P. Bertolino. Mr. Bertolino, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you've known the family for decades, so this is an emotional time for them, probably for you as a friend, but you're also, their attorney. So I'm very thankful that you're here to answer questions on their behalf. And I'd like to just start with the simple. When did you become involved with the Laundrie family as their attorney pertaining to this particular case?
Yes, good evening, Ashley, and thank you for having me. I would say that was on September 11th.
So you didn't speak with Brian or Roberta or Chris between September 1st, when he arrived back in Florida, and September 11th, 10 days later?
I can tell you I didn't say that. What I can tell you is any conversations I had with Brian, Chris, and Roberta would be privileged and confidential. What you asked me was, when did I become involved for this particular case? And it was on September 11th.
So then presumably before September 11th, if you had conversations with them, say September 1st to September 11th, those 10 days, those would not be privileged because you hadn't been retained as counsel?
Well, that's not true either, because I've been the Laundrie family attorney for well over 20 years. So any conversations I have with them with respect to legal matters would be privileged and confidential.
So when Brian came home to Northport on the 1st, as is evidenced by a card reader, a license plate reader, seeing the white van coming home, how did you have your first engagement with the family? Was it a family meeting? Was it a conference call? Like, how did you first connect with them after he had returned?
Again, any conversation I've had with Chris, Roberta, and Brian, was by telephone. But the dates and what we discussed are all attorney-client privileged and confidential. And I'm sorry to say that I can't speak about those things.
Counselor, I fully understand that you cannot reveal those privileged engagements, the content within. I'm just sort of going around the contours of it, if you'd allow me to. And that is that I'm just curious about, because you're, as I understand it, I'm talking to you in Long Island, correct?
That's correct.
And the Laundries have always been in Northport.
No, they haven't always been in Northport. They lived on Long Island for many years. I don't know exactly how many years they've moved down to Florida.
Sure.
But,
understand. I just mean for the purpose of this particular engagement, say from September 1st on, you did not go to Northport to engage with them. You really had to do this from afar.
That's correct. Everything has been, by telephone, text message, or how should we say, FaceTime.
Or sort of these group Zooms. Did you have like the family, group FaceTime or the group Zoom like this?
No, we didn't. We didn't do something like that.
Conference calls?
We've had a couple of conference calls, yes.
And when you had the conference calls, I mean, I'm just thinking of myself as a mother. And if my son were, engaging with our attorney, it would be difficult. And I was curious about how Mrs. Laundrie's reactions were, how she was digesting. And again, you don't have to tell me what you were discussing. I understand that's privilege, but just the reaction, the nature, and the sort of taking all of the information in real time. How did she manage that?
You know, Ashley, I don't want to give you an interview where I can't answer any of your questions, but you know, it seems like most of the questions you're asking are going to border on the attorney-client confidentiality that I can't answer. If you're asking me, you know, in general, what has been, you know, Roberta Laundrie's, you know, demeanor and disposition over the last 4 or 5 weeks, I can tell you she's been very upset. You know, she's, again, been distraught. And in the last couple of days, she's grieving.
Fully understand. And again, I'm not going to press you on what was said. I'm, again, trying to go around the outside as best I can to get the color, the essence, and the feel of what the family was going through in those early days between September 1st and September 11th, when Gabby Petito was declared missing. And even thereafter, up until the 13th, when Brian himself left for the hike and didn't come back. I guess all I'm trying to get a feel for is that the family meeting with you were can I put it this way? When you had the family meeting with them via electronics, was it a happy occasion?
You know, often I tell people as an attorney, I often don't get to deal with them on happy occasions. So, you know, you're using a term happy that I would never use. What I can tell you is every conversation's been serious. Every conversation that I've had, as any attorney would have with their client, you know, doesn't necessarily border on happy. And I don't mean to beat you up on the use of that word. But what I can tell you is I'm not at liberty to discuss anything prior to September 11th. You know, you can ask me many different ways, but I'm going to keep giving you the same answer. You know, all of that is going to be attorney-client privilege. Anything after
without
September
divulging,
11th,
sure, without divulging anything they said, were they at least all three of them, you know, able to engage with you and fill you in on their perspectives of anything that you were discussing?
on September 12th and September 13th, yes, absolutely.
All three of them could fill you in on how things were going within the household. Your discussion as a group was, you know, was full and rich, and you could get a feel for what was happening in that household through your conversation with the three of them.
I had private conversations with Brian. I had private conversations with Chris, and I had private conversations with Chris and Roberta separately. I can tell you that, you know, yeah, I had an understanding of you know, how the house was functioning at that point in time.
But you didn't have the family together, the family unit together to find out how they were coping as a unit.
There were a couple of conversations where, you know, all, you know, three members of the family in that household were together. Yes.
Okay. So presumably, and what days were those conversations? Because it's, you know, the mood and the change in what happened in the dynamic of that family is important. What days did you have those conversations where you knew how all three of them were feeling at the same time?
I would say Sunday the 12th and Monday the 13th.
So those are critical days. Can you tell me the demeanor of Brian Laundrie on the 12th and on the 13th? And when I ask you about demeanor, I'd like to try to get specific. Did he seem suicidal?
No. And I literally just spoke to the family, Chris and Roberta, maybe 45 minutes ago. And, you know, we repeated this conversation or that question. And, you know, Brian was not, you know, outwardly suicidal. And what Mrs. Laundrie, what Roberta just said to me, she goes, you know, how do you really know, you know, what do you really know what somebody's thinking? And, you know, we can suspect what their mood might be, but what do you really know what's going on inside? And I can tell you that, you know, Brian was alert. He was coherent. You know, when he was speaking with me, I had no inclination or indication that he would hurt himself.
I have heard you say on other interviews just in the last 24 hours that he was grieving. And anyone who is grieving is sad over death. Was he sad over the death of Gabby Petito when he was grieving prior to going out on his hike, from which he did not return?
And Ashley, as I've said, all day long, because I know I've been getting heat on the use of that word. Yesterday was a very long day. The day before that was a long day. One of the last interviews I gave of the evening, which was a last minute thing, I used the word grieving, which I had been using all day long with respect to Chris and Roberta and the news of the death of their son. I clarified that. I said he was upset. He was distressed. Chris described him to me as he was leaving. And this was several weeks later when Chris and I were talking about it. He said, Steve, he was upset. He was distressed. I knew I shouldn't let him walk out the door, but I couldn't stop him. I used the term grieving. It was probably a poor choice of words, and everybody has pounced on that and said, well, what was he grieving? Who was he grieving? Grieving was, used by myself multiple times yesterday with respect to Chris and Roberta, and it was a poor choice of words to be using for Brian.
So did Brian know that Gabby was dead at that point?
I can't answer that question. What Brian knew or didn't know would be privileged. It would be confidential, and certainly not something I can discuss now.
And respectfully, Counselor, I understand your privilege, but as a journalist, I do have to ask: did Brian kill Gabby?
That's it's a tough question to answer. Other than no, to my knowledge, I can't say that he did or didn't. I'm sure the FBI may be able to fill those answers in at a different time.
Do Chris and Roberta Laundrie know if their son killed Gabby?
I can't comment on that either. I mean, what Brian told, when I say I can't comment, you're asking me what the parents knew, what their son told them. I do not know.
You have mentioned in other interviews that there will be time as we move ahead in this story for more questions to be answered, perhaps more secrets to be revealed. Clearly, there's no exposure for the youngest member of the family that you represent. He is no longer. He can no longer be tried for anything, even posthumously. So there's zero exposure other than legacy for Brian Laundrie. For that reason, how long will it be until you can actually tell us these things?
As I said, there are some unanswered questions. There are some issues that need to be resolved. There are, charges out there still in Wyoming. There are certain things that I even discussed with the FBI today with respect to Chris and Roberta that still have to be resolved. There's been a lot of accusations. There's been a lot of finger pointing, and those issues will be resolved in the coming days, weeks, or months, however long it takes. This is just wrapping up in the last 48 to 72 hours, and we're going to need some more time to work through this.
Mr. Bertolino, what do you expect is going to be found in the notebook? Because the Northport police are saying that it is indeed salvageable.
I have no idea what's in the notebook. To my knowledge, the notebook was something that was maybe on the trip. I've heard many different things about this notebook. I don't know if Brian wrote a suicide note or if he wrote a goodbye note. I don't know if it was just a notebook that contained drawings. We'll have to wait and see what's in there.
Mr. Bertolino, is it possible we might see a confession in that notebook?
Again, Ashley, I don't know what's in the notebook. The FBI may disclose what they find in there. They may not.
You are one of the last 3 people who spoke with him prior to him leaving with that notebook and a backpack and a dry bag. Based on his demeanor, and I'm not asking you to reveal what he said, based on his demeanor, would it surprise you if there were a confession in that notebook?
After the way this case has played out, I don't think anything would surprise me. At this point, even the fact that the Laundries, Chris and Roberta, are the ones who happen to find the items and the location of the remains. Everybody seems to be suspect on that. There have been so many twists and turns in this saga. I don't think anything would surprise me.
Do I take that as a no? It would not surprise you if there were a confession in that notebook?
I'll stick by my original comment, which is, nothing's going to surprise me in this case.
You may be bolstered to know that the Northport police back up this notion that Chris and Roberta simply stumbled upon the dry bag and the notebook within about a 30 to 45-minute walk, whereby the authorities and millions of dollars of the highest tech equipment could do nothing of the sort in 38 days. For the public, it's confounding, and you have to respect just how the magnitude of the coincidence. The Northport police is saying it's also coincidental. But do you know any other information that would prove otherwise, that it is not coincidental?
Literally before this interview, I was on the phone with somebody who, has more information about that than I do. The cameraman that was there that filmed this, I have thanked the police for being there. I have thanked the cameraman for being there. And yeah, I do understand that the public says this is confounding. It's unbelievable. But everybody who's been there and everybody who has firsthand knowledge comes back and says the same thing. This is the beginning of the beginning of the preserve. This is where Brian was known to hike. If he went into that preserve and did something to hurt himself, and maybe he did it right away, it would be expected that he would be found there. So, as coincidental as you say it really is not such a far stretch to say that if Brian did in fact go to the preserve to hurt himself, and he did it right away, it makes perfect sense that that's where it is. The park was underwater. I'm sorry?
Sorry to interrupt. Do you know if he took any kind of medications out with him in the backpack or in the dry bag that might have contained any sort of substances that would have helped him in a quest to commit suicide?
I have no knowledge of any substances whatsoever, either prescribed or otherwise.
Do you have any knowledge of the contents of the dry bag or the backpack?
Not at all. And, to my understanding, the parents, Chris and Roberta, didn't know what was in the backpack, when Brian left the house. I believe we were asked that question on September 17th. And, Chris and Roberta said they didn't know what he put in the backpack. He just, had the backpack packed and said, I'm going out for a hike.
To that end, I want to talk a little bit about the timing of all of it, because the press sort of, felt a little yanked around, as did the police, with the timing of when, Brian went on his hike. Originally, it was Tuesday the 14th, and then late into this whole ordeal, it became Monday. I heard you speak on Chris Cuomo's program the other day, suggesting that you, in fact, were the person to call the FBI and notify them the next day after he didn't return, which would be Tuesday, correct?
So it is correct that I notified the FBI, and, you'll have to forgive me because the days were blending together. And, I spoke to the FBI just today on that issue again. And, the FBI confirmed it is well documented on their side that it was Thursday. And, I was reminded that I specifically said, Brian didn't come home, tonight. Would you come home, having all the press and everything else going on out there? The confusion initially was Chris and Roberta were telling me it was Tuesday, and Tuesday night Chris went out to look for him. It was Wednesday that Chris and Roberta went to look and hiked a little bit in the preserve, and it was Thursday that they retrieved the car. We then received some information from press that indicated that they had video of the car in the driveway on Wednesday. So we had to go back with Chris and Roberta step by step of each day. They had been in their home every day. The days were blending together. It was very stressful. And when we went through the period and I showed them the video clip of the Mustang on I believe it was the 15th in the driveway, Chris said to me, well, then it had to be Monday. And I went back to the FBI, and the FBI said, yes, we believed it was Monday from the beginning. But we do understand that the days were blending together. So as I
But
said,
this is my problem, that the days blending together, and I only interrupt because I'm a mother of boys. And if my son had unexpectedly come home from a trip without his fiance, um, stopped talking, refused to speak to police, she's reported missing. He is, in your, as you said, mistaken characterization, grieving. I mean, that tells me that he is apoplectically sad. As you mischaracterized it as grieving, it is at the very least horrifically sad. And he walks out my door and doesn't come home. I do not forget that date. That date is etched in my mind as a mother, and I dare say that my children's father would feel exactly the same way. So I struggle with any mistake about what day my extremely distraught son went out on a hike and didn't come home.
and that may be true, for everyone. But I would also tend to bet that you haven't been in the position that the laundries have been put in the last 3 to 4 to 5 weeks. And in that week in particular, they were in the house every day. They were going through it. I was relying on the communication they had, but there was no doubt in my mind that I was the one that called the FBI. And, I've had multiple conversations with the FBI, initially. And I even said to the FBI, I said, I know I told you that the night of or the morning after. So I was even hedging my comments because I didn't know in which conversation I had informed them. Was it the night of or was it the morning after? And ultimately, in conjunction with the FBI, we all agreed that it was Monday the 13th. The proof is in the pudding, if you will. In this case, the reporter showed me that the vehicle was in the driveway on the 15th. The FBI was, saying from the beginning of our conversations with them that it was the 13th. So when we put the sequence of events together, it was the 13th, 14th, and 15th.
And our Brian Enton asked Josh Taylor of the Northport Police about all of this timeline, and specifically your contention that you notified the FBI that Brian was missing the day after he didn't come home. And I'm just going to ask our control room to play what the Northport Police said today about that to Brian Enton. It was Josh on Brian being reported missing. It's not a flattering depiction of you, and they're flat out saying it's not true. So let me just play this moment for you, and I get you to comment on the other side.
Mr. Bertolino says that he called and reported Brian missing sooner than Friday, and that it was just the official report filed on Friday. Is that true?
I can tell you that the Northport Police Department, that when we got the call on Friday that he was being reported missing, was news to us. I was in the room myself. It was a very surprising moment. I can say that with 100% certainty. Whatever he may have said in passing, this is a situation where we're trying to, they were uncooperative on Saturday, not revealing any details. We've got a missing young lady. Really, their credibility was, what's going on there. If I'm understanding him correctly, he says that he may have said something to someone in the FBI. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. What I know is that none of our actions and what we've said show that that's a possibility at all.
So, Mr. Bertolino, they say the police and the FBI have been in lockstep all the way through this, and that they would have known had you reported it to the FBI. How do you respond?
So, Ashley, what I just heard, if you listen closely, is that the Northport police gentleman, Josh Taylor, I believe. I don't want to get his name wrong. Is it Mr. Taylor?
Correct.
Okay. So what Mr. Taylor just said was that I purportedly reported it to the FBI. He doesn't know. And therein is your answer. He does not know. I can tell you that the FBI does not have a problem with this. Today at 2 p.m., 2:15, I had a meeting with 2 representatives from the FBI in my office, and they once again concurred and confirmed there is absolutely no doubt that I informed the FBI that Brian didn't come home on day 1. Let me tell you something else, Ashley, before you interrupt me again. I did not call anybody on Friday. I heard Mr. Taylor's press conference on Thursday. On Thursday, Mr. Taylor said, when asked a question, do you know where Brian is? He said yes. He was asked a question a little bit later in that same presser, do you know exactly where he is? He said yes. I was shocked. I immediately called my client and said, do you know where Brian is? Because I don't, we haven't seen him. Was he picked up? Because if he was picked up by the PD, they would have to inform me. And they said no. At that point, me and Chris and Roberta. With that knowledge, Friday came. Friday evening, somewhere around 4:45, I received a call from the FBI. Let me be perfectly clear, unequivocally. I received a call from the FBI. I did not call them. It came up on the screen in my truck. I told my daughter she needed to leave the truck. The FBI said to me, "You got a tip that Brian was seen in Tampa." And I said, "That's wonderful, because as you know, we haven't seen him all week. We told you he was missing." And the FBI agent said, "Yes, we know that, but we want to come to the house to see if he's there." And I said, "Well, who gave you the tip? Who said this?" Because I thought it was a ruse for the FBI to get into the house, was my belief. I then said to my daughter that I need to take care of this. And I told the FBI that I needed to take care of something with my daughter. We agreed on a time for 6:15. At 6:15, the FBI came to the laundry residence on the 17th. They came inside, we had discussions. I was here in New York, and on FaceTime with them, we agreed that the best course of action and the formal procedural course of action would be to file a missing persons report so that Brian could be located officially, so that they could put the resources into locating him. Somewhere along the line, perhaps someone from the laundry family household.
Yeah, this is the attorney speaking last night.
Got some kind of case number. Whatever they did, I don't know.
It's just crazy because even the attorney doesn't make any sense. All his dates are wrong.
It was Chris, Roberta, there was a representative, there was two representatives.
I don't know. I just don't understand how he's only been missing for a month and you're telling me there's nothing but bones? I don't know.
And if you listen closely to that clip that you just played, you will hear Josh Taylor say, Mr. Bertolino or the attorney.
It's just so weird, you know?
And here's the issue. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, nobody
I don't either.
called me and said, have you seen Brian?
And then they just happened to find that, what was it, the next day, his parents go out and, there's a bag, and then they find remains of half his body. I don't know. It's just really weird.
And then Thursday, the events unfolded I just told you about.
Oh yeah, the parents definitely knew something. They did.
That's how it played out.
And so
I know they did.
Clear on this, because it's not.
There's just no way.
Talked to the FBI and said,
And I wouldn't be surprised if they happened to come on and say those were not Brian's remains.
No, I didn't say that either. I said on Monday when I reported to the FBI that Brian didn't return
But this
home,
lady who did the interview killed it.
Monday, he went on the walk.
That's correct. And he never returned
Every
home.
time he gets mad, it's because somebody points out the facts.
You made a reference to him not returning home, or was it the next day you told the FBI?
What I said to you was that I had multiple conversations with the FBI during, Monday and Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday.
This interview was like
to the FBI
this is the latest interview that's come out.
The FBI confirmed with me that their records reflected that it was Monday night.
So you were talking to the FBI.
I'm telling you, I wouldn't be
Sunday,
surprised
even
if they
before
say
he
that
went
is
for the
not
walk. And you
Brian
were talking to them on
Laundrie's
Monday
remains.
before he went for the walk, and you talked to them on Monday after he went for the walk?
Okay, Ashley, you're bringing multiple issues together.
I'm trying to get clarity, that's all. Just details matter on this one.
They do.
I'm trying to like listen to all the interviews, and I'm gonna do a reaction
At
video
11:30 p.m. on Saturday night, I got
and
the
get
first
all
phone call
the.
regarding this matter.
He's
At
very
1:30 in the
defensive.
morning on Sunday was the first phone call from the FBI on this matter. At 8 a.m. on Sunday was the next phone call
It gets
from the
worse.
FBI on this matter. It was a different agent. It was on the initial introduction, if you will, of this case. On Monday, 2 FBI agents came to my office to introduce themselves and to discuss this case. On Monday evening, and or in my recollection, Tuesday morning, I reported to the FBI in a normal conversation that Brian didn't return. Upon going back and forth with the FBI on the actual conversation in which that was reported,
just for a
the
second.
FBI confirmed that it was Monday the 13th.
I don't know if what point you came in listening to this interview, but both Brian, Roberta, whatever her name is, and Chris Laundrie left to go to Orlando to meet up with an attorney, but yet he said they never met up. It was strictly phone calls and like FaceTime or whatever. Yeah, I don't either. Um,
13th, that their records reflect that I told them that Brian didn't come home that night. On Tuesday,
Now that I have that up,
now hold on.
I was just going to say,
on clarity.
Yep.
On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, there was zero communication with respect to where is Brian between me and the FBI and myself.
it's all just surprising because Josh Taylor said today they were in lockstep with the FBI all the way along. Even the Northport police chief tweeted out, get us an interview with the client on the following Wednesday. No, that's what they told us today. That's what they told us today.
Play the clip you just played, and let's listen again where he says, I do not know.
Oh,
Because
most
that's what he
definitely.
says,
I'm telling you,
They all knew.
Brian Enton today in a whole, it's a 15-minute interview, sir. It's a 15-minute interview, and they said that they've been operating in lockstep with the FBI all the way along.
Okay, play the clip you played a moment ago, and let's listen to him say,
Okay.
I don't know.
You know what? We're going to wrap that clip up. We absolutely 100%. That's why you're here. 100%, and we're going to rack that clip up. It takes a minute or so. I'm going to go to break, get the control room to do it, and after the break, we'll play it, and we'll get the clarity on that. Is that okay, Mr. Bertolino?
That's fine with me.
Okay, we'll see you in just a few minutes. We are back with Stephen Bertolino, the attorney for the Laundrie family. And Mr. Bertolino, the clip that we played is a full minute long, but the person who actually conducted the interview is Brian Enton. And he has the full characterization of what the Northport police told him for 15 minutes during that interview. So I'd like to turn it over to Brian Enton for a moment to tell you exactly what they told him. Brian, Mr. Bertolino is on with the two of us.
Hi, Ashley. Hi, Mr. Bertolino. I've been in touch with Mr. Bertolino for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Basically, Josh Taylor with Northport Police has said that the way he has phrased it, that they are at the same table, sitting at the same table every day as the FBI, sharing information, constant communication with each other. And I was thinking back to that week when the police chief had that press conference. On that Thursday, the police chief said that he had that he knew where Brian Laundrie was. But it wasn't just that Thursday. Almost every day when I interviewed Josh Taylor, I would ask him, do you know where Brian Laundrie is? And he would say, yes, we know where he is. So I was just listening to your conversation between the two of you. And it's just those interviews we did, and not just us, but many outlets were doing them with the police. They were on TV every night. And it's just hard to imagine that the FBI was also watching this and had this information from Mr. Bertolino, but wasn't sharing it with Northport PD.
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
Good. Nice to hear your voice, Mr. Bertolino.
But I wasn't sure if it was my turn. And Brian, I concur. It would be hard to believe that, right? So 2 days ago, I had a conversation with somebody in the Northport PD to clear the air on this one as well. And I offered to put myself on speaker so that brass could hear it, so that the upper echelons could hear it, that I wasn't trying to, quote, put the Northport PD under the bus when I brought this up. They told me in no uncertain terms.
And then they talk about, what date their son went missing. And then the date changed on when their son went missing. And of course, when they left the house and they went to Orlando to go speak to Mr. Bertolino or whatever his name is, they never even met up with him. They went to a library and sat down at a table the whole time. But yet, in every interview, he states they only had phone call, text message conversations. That's it. And there were also cameras set up a little bit before Brian went missing, and there's still cameras at the neighbors' houses.
That they had no idea that the FBI knew about this. They were completely shocked on Friday to learn that Brian wasn't in the house.
And
So
if you
Brian,
didn't do
everything you
anything,
say
why
makes
would you
sense.
need a damn
Absolutely
attorney
everything you say
anyway?
makes sense. But I will tell you, it is not my responsibility to communicate between the FBI and Northport PD. I can tell you once again, as sure as I'm sitting here talking on this screen, the FBI confirmed in my office again today at 2:15. This is a non-issue for them. They have it documented that Brian was reported missing by me to them on Monday evening. My recollection was it was either Monday evening conversation or a Tuesday morning conversation, but I know that I reported it on day one. That being said, Ashley, you told me you would replay that clip. What you chose to do was bring Brian Enton in. I would ask you respectfully, let's play the clip. Let's hear, not from Brian.
I'm gonna change
let's
my
hear
shirt.
from Josh Taylor once again.
I get dressed for work.
Let's
You
play
got
it.
well.
because you want clarity.
We've had we've had 40 with you, but the control room is about to play it. So control room, fire
Let's
away.
hear him
Let's
say,
roll.
I don't know. Let's listen to
Mr. Bertolino says that he called and reported Brian missing sooner than Friday, and that it was just the official report filed on Friday. Is that true?
I can tell you that the Northport Police Department, that when we got the call on Friday that he was being reported missing, was news to us. I was in the room myself. It was a very surprising moment. I can say that with 100% certainty. Whatever he may have said in passing, this is a situation where we're trying to, they were uncooperative on Saturday, not revealing any details. We've got a missing young lady. Really, their credibility was, what's going on there. If I'm understanding him correctly, he says that he may have said something to someone in the FBI. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. What I know is that none of our actions and what we've said show that that's a possibility at all.
Do you see what
You
they
wanna
said? Nothing
apologize
that they say says that it's a possibility at all. I mean, did you hear that last line, Mr. Bertolino? Nothing that we've seen says that's a possibility at all.
Yeah, I
What
do
he said
too.
was he may have said it in passing, and then he said, I don't know.
I
That's what he said,
donated
Ashley. I'll take
money,
it.
and I should be
possibility
getting my
at
little
all.
bracelets.
No, he didn't say that. Not with
Can I ask
Brian
you a
Ensign, did he
question?
I
say?
got one for me and my
Yeah. I
mom
think we should get Brian
and
Ensign, and he
Ava.
conducted the interview. He sent us the tape. We've now played it twice. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I just had a quick question for Mr. Bertolino that I was thinking about. I mean, if he was at home watching the news all week and
You know,
hearing
it's
the police
scary
say that they
whenever
had eyes on Brian and the Laundries were watching the news or were
my
hearing from
younger
Mr.
two,
Bertolino
Ava
that the
and
police were saying
CJ,
that. But if they were worried
and
about
me and
Brian
Ava were
and he was
talking about
missing
this
and
whole
they
case,
wanted him to be found, like,
and I
wouldn't
was
you want
looking
to
at
correct the
Gabby,
record so
and
that
I was
people
looking
would
at
actually be
Ava.
looking for Brian?
I put a picture of Gabby up to Ava's
So,
face,
Brian, we're not going to get to the bottom of this. You know,
and they,
I'll get past the fact that Ashley won't concede that
a lot of the
what was
features
said out of
in
Josh Taylor's
Gabby's
own
face
mouth
and
was that
Ava
I may have said it
look
in
just
passing and that
alike.
he does not know. Let's move past that
And I
because
got
the tape
chilled
speaks for
after
itself.
that.
What I would tell you, Brian, is we were not at that moment. We were
Ava
not
even noticed
concerned
it.
that Brian, had hurt himself or wasn't coming home. Chris and Roberta had indicated to me that Brian had gone out camping and hiking for multiple days, many, many times. He was a young man. They weren't concerned. They thought he was clearing the air, clearing his mind. It wasn't until we got the
And then
call
why
on
would you just
Friday
not
that there was a tip he was seen in Tampa that we were concerned.
answer any
Why
of the
did you report
parents'
it to the
phone
FBI,
calls?
Mr. Bertolino? If they thought he needed to clear his mind and he's an avid hiker and camper, why were you calling or talking to them on Monday night or Tuesday morning saying, yikes, he hasn't come home? Why is it an issue?
Ashley, nobody said yikes, he hasn't come home, Ashley. So let's.
Why would you report it to the FBI
Even
if he didn't come home
even
and
she
he
got
needed to clear his
chills.
mind?
Use the word report. I was having conversations with the FBI a couple of times a day on those few days. What I said to you was, in my conversation with the
Oh
FBI,
yeah,
either
she
Monday night
knows
or
to come and
Tuesday
talk to
morning,
me.
I mentioned to the FBI that, by the way, Brian didn't come home.
She'll tell
As
me
part
if
of that
somebody at school
conversation,
is
I was
being mean to
reminded
her
today from the
or
FBI.
anything.
He said, yes,
And when I,
remember you
showed
think
her
what you said to me.
this,
Would you come home with
even
all
the
those
whole
press in front of your house?
police incident
He
Okay, got it.
contact
between
the
them two,
FBI
how Gabby
specifically
was
about
just
that.
so
I wanna
shaken
leave you with a
up
break. I'm losing commercial breaks
and,
the machine
just
I can't
blaming
stop. But I do
herself
want to
like
ask you
it's
after the
her,
break
it's
about the
her.
Northport police saying that they lost him, that they just screwed up and they didn't see him leave to the reserve, which ended up with a
And
dead man in
I
the reserve. I want to get your
updated my
reaction to that.
bio
Stephen P.
on
Bertolino and Brian
Facebook,
Ensign
and
after
I
the break.
was like,
All right,
I think
Mr.
I said,
Bertolino, quick question. The
speak
police said
up.
that they lost your client. There was surveillance on
Don't
them,
ever
and when he
just
went off to the
walk
reserve, they didn't even
away.
notice the Mustang leaving. Does that mean
I might
that
have to look what I
Brian
put.
Laundrie is missing because the
I
police
know I
lost him,
said,
or is Brian Laundrie dead because Brian Laundrie did it to himself?
it might be, don't
Ashley,
ever
you
be
can't blame
silent.
the police. You can't blame
Or
the
no,
FBI.
if you see
can't blame the
something, say
parents.
something.
I've had people blaming me for the last couple of weeks, and specifically the last couple of days. Bottom line is, we don't know the manner or cause of death.
That's
of
what I
Brian.
said. I said if I was Gabby,
But let's
I would
take
have
the
left.
hypothetical
I
and
would
say
have went
that Brian did,
home.
take his own life.
I would
If
have
that's the
ran
case,
home.
that's on Brian.
I would have kept
It's not on
going.
the
I would have
parents.
left
It's not
him.
on the FBI. It's not on the police. It's not on me. And I think we need to wait and find out exactly what happened. The
I
parents shouldn't
asked
blame
that
the
question
police. You
so
shouldn't
many
blame the
times. Why
police.
did Gabby just
And
not
that's
go
just
home? But I think she was
I
just
have to squeeze in another break, and I have one
so
final
afraid.
question for you. We've blown every break out in the show, so if you'll permit me, right after the break, I'll be back with our final question with Stephen P. Bertolino. Back with Mr. Bertolino, the Laundrie's lawyer. Stephen,
He
there's a
even
critical question
left
here. I have
her
2
for
minutes
a
left until the end of the
week
show, but I must get you on the record on this. You
by
told me at the beginning of the
herself.
show that you spoke with the
Oh yeah, she
Laundrie
was
family
scared.
together on on the 12th and the 13th.
She would still be here if she would have just went home.
But if you spoke with all three of them together, there is no privilege.
But I think
And
she
you know
felt
that as a lawyer.
like
So what did
she
Brian say
could,
about
you
what
know,
happened to Gabby Petito on that Sunday and that Monday
change
before he left for
Brian in some kind of way, maybe.
Okay, so actually, if you
I
heard
don't
what
know.
said, I had
I
multiple
don't.
conversations with the laundries. I had private conversations with Chris, private conversations with Brian, and I had conversations with Chris and Roberta, and I had conversations with them together.
And then I went to
Now, I
when they
know that
released
people,
that
some
second
parts of the
body
conversations
cam,
when they were all together had nothing to do
and it was
with
crazy
attorney-client
because he
privilege.
said he had
And
no
a lot
cell
of people
phone. And then all of a sudden, Gabby said, "Can you please remind him to get his charger for his phone because he forgets to charge his phone."
I disagree. I think you can represent multiple clients. As
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
it's
you
like
get
she
waivers of
saw something,
representation, as you know.
You
So
can't. You can't have that
and
conversation in criminal proceedings, and that does mean that the privilege is waived. You can do it in real estate, and gosh,
the
when you
cops
come back
even
on Monday,
knew
I have 22 seconds
she
left
had an
until the black
anxiety. She was
cutoff of
having
this
an
program
anxiety
happens.
attack.
But I have not finished my conversation with you, Mr.
And they
President. Would you
asked
come
her,
back
"Do you
Monday?"
have anything to take?"
I don't think that's possible. Someone else wants me
Yes,
on
it has
Monday.
to be.
I don't know why.
They had
I'm calling
obviously
you
gotten
Monday,
to a
Mr. Brilliant.
huge
Thank you for spending the
fight.
hour with us.
He had scratches on his face for a reason. Oh, was that the end of it?
Welcome to Banfield, when the manhunt for Brian
I'll turn this
Laundrie
thing on.
ended, a whole new chapter in this saga began. The questions that
But-
have been so confounding. Why did Brian leave his fiancée in Wyoming? What was his state of mind before he left home for the reserve? And
Yeah,
what if
and there was a guy that called in and said he saw
the attorney
a male
Mr. Berlino, thank you so much for joining us. I know
like hitting or pushing. I don't remember exactly. I'm gonna have to go back and watch the whole
you're also, their attorney. So
both
very thankful for your answers
videos.
on their behalf. And I'd like to just start with the simple.
But
When did you become involved?
he strangled her and killed her, strangled her to death, literally.
Yes, good evening, Ashley. Thank you for having me. I would say that was on September 11th.
So you didn't speak with Brian or Roberta or Chris between September 1st, when he arrived back in Florida, and September 11th, 10 days later?
You know, I've been in
I can tell you I didn't
a
say
domestic
that, but I can tell you in any conversations I had with Brian and Chris and Roberta,
relationship, and I was very, very fortunate to get out of it.
what you asked me was when did I become involved for this particular
And
case?
I told Ava about it.
So then presumably before September 11th, if you had conversations with them, say September 1st to September 11th, those 10 days, those would not be privileged because you hadn't been retained as counsel?
Well, that's not true either, because I've been the Laundrie family attorney for well over 20 years. So any conversations I have with them with respect to legal matters would be privileged and confidential.
So when Brian came home to Northport on the 1st, as is evidenced by a card reader,
If I think about it, I start like shaking. And
how did you have your first engagement?
but
with
you know,
the
I
family?
told Ava, I said, don't ever
How did you first connect with them
ever stand
after
for
you
that.
had
You know, and the neighbors even said that they would hear Gabby yelling in their house.
But the dates and what we discussed are all attorney-client privileged and confidential. And I'm sorry to say that I can't speak about those things.
Counselor, I fully understand.
And then they couldn't even report Gabby missing because she wasn't actually home, but yet her fiance comes back with her van.
That's correct.
And the laundry store was in Northport.
Something in my gut tells me they paid somebody. They paid somebody to keep quiet. One officer in the Moab police, he I think he took, I don't know if he was either fired or he just left.
Or sort of these group Zooms. Did you have like
Oh yeah,
group FaceTime with the group?
Brian's parents, the woman I think wears the pants in the relationship. Honestly,
We've had a couple of conference calls, yes.
And
that's
when
what
you
I
had the
think.
conference calls, I mean, I'm just thinking of myself as a mother. And if my son were, engaging with our attorney, it would be difficult. And I was curious about how Mrs.
I'm very.
or how she was digesting. And again, you don't have to tell me what you were discussing. I understand that's privilege, but just the reaction, the nature, and the sort of.
I made sure to let my kids know
the information in real time
to come to me with anything.
Ashley, I don't want to give you
I'm sure they do.
I can't answer any of the questions, but it seems like most of the questions you're asking are going to.
I'm telling you, it's that mom, that woman.
In general, what has been Roberta Laundrie's demeanor and disposition over the last 4 or 5 weeks, I can tell you she's been very upset.
It's that woman.
In the last couple of days, she's grieving.
Fully understand. And again, I'm not going to press you on what was said. I'm, again, trying to go around the outside as best I can to get the color, the essence, and the feel of what the family was going through in those early days between September 1st and September 11th.
I'm about to go drive her. Had to slip on some clothes right quick, and
up until the 13th when Brian himself
you're eating too.
left for the hike and didn't come back.
Had to eat a little bit of something before I go drive for Uber.
Can I put it this way?
Pick up the drunk kids so they can get home safe.
Often I tell people as an attorney,
I've got some crazy stories, but some very terrifying stories too.
Every conversation that I've had, as any attorney would have with their client, doesn't necessarily border on happy. And I don't mean to beat you up on the use of that word.
I drive for Uber and Lyft.
I'm not at liberty to discuss anything prior to September 11th. You can ask me many different ways.
Since I've started back 3 months ago, there were 2 accidents that happened right in front of me and a couple of riders that I had.
September 12th and September 13th. Yes, absolutely.
They didn't make it in the accidents. One happened last weekend, and then the very first home LSU game, it was their first early game. First early home game. There was somebody, we almost hit them, but it was a truck that came on our side, flipped over twice, and ran into 2 poles, like wooden poles, and split them in half.
There were a couple of conversations where all 3 members of the family in that household were together. Yes.
It's definitely good side money. Let's see, last weekend, Friday, I didn't really drive too much, but Friday I made 75, and then Saturday I made $426.
Brian Laundrie on the 12th, and on the 13th. And when I ask you about demeanor, I'd like to try
No,
to
but
get specific.
it's
Did he
dangerous.
seem suicidal?
So that's another
No,
thing.
and
I keep pepper spray.
to the family, Chris and Roberta made him 45 minutes ago. And, this conversation or that question, and Brian was not, outwardly suicidal. And what Mrs. London, what Roberta just said to me, she goes, how do you really know? What do you really know? What somebody?
Of course, last weekend was LSU and Florida game, and that's always a big night for LSU. Mm-hmm.
I have heard you say on other interviews.
Rides would not stop coming through. I didn't get home until 6 o'clock Sunday morning.
Is sad over death.
But I wasn't mad because I made good money.
Prior to going out on his hike, from which he did not return.
And Ashley, as I've said, all day long, because I know I've been getting heat on the use of that word. Yesterday was a very long day. The day before that was a long day. One of the last
Well, I guess it's 11:46 here. You should. I'm serious. It's easy. Do it on. It's like more during the weekdays, but it's like early. Like when people need a ride to work. When they have rush hour, they have set prices, and it's called a surge. And it depends like how busy that area is, but sometimes it'll be like $7.50 to even pick them up, and then the money you make to bring them home and stuff. It's good money. It really is. And it's easy. But but I will be back on. I'm come back tomorrow. Alive again. Yes, go look into it. I'm telling you, it's a good side job. Thank you. Have a good night. I'll be coming live tomorrow at some point. I don't know what time. But have a good night and talk to you later.